Good evening. Let me try that again. Good evening. Thank you. There will be a test afterwards. So, welcome to NYU. My name is Troy McKenzie. I am proud to be the dean of this law school. And thank you for joining us this evening for the 26th anniversary of the Attorney General Robert Abrams Public Service Lecture. For the last 26 years, this lecture has been, and it continues to be, a hallmark event here at the law school, which celebrates our public servants and dedication to the rule of law. And the goal of the lecture is to showcase leading voices from the public sector, and it's meant to foster intellectual dialogue on pressing issues of those in law and government. And most importantly, it lets us honor and thank our esteemed alumnus, the Honorable Robert Abrams. I'm going to talk a little bit about Bob, and then he will introduce our speaker this evening, the Attorney General of Delaware, Kathy Jennings. So I could talk all evening about Bob Abrams, but let me just say briefly before I talk too long, he really is a wonderful example of dedication to public service, and his life and his career is an inspiration to all of us here at NYU. He had a 28-year career in government. He was a member of the New York State Assembly. He then served as Bronx Borough President for 3 terms. And in 1978, he was elected to serve the first of 4 terms as New York Attorney General, a position he held for nearly 15 years. Now, I will say, as a kid growing up in New Jersey, I thought that was the title. I thought it was Attorney General Bob Abrams was the title, because every time Channel 7 News talked about something, it was Attorney General Bob Abrams. I didn't realize there could be another kind of Attorney General. While he served as Attorney General, he received many awards and earned national prominence that is rarely achieved by state-level officials. And he did so by building a reputation as an active Attorney General who used the power of law in service of a better world. He was a consumer advocate, protector of the environment, advocate for reform in the financial services industry, guardian of nonprofit organizations, defender of civil rights, and supporter of fairness in the real estate market. And many, more than 200 of the legislative proposals that he worked on throughout his years were passed and signed into law. He then joined the law firm of Strucken Levan in 1994, but he has remained very active on the issues that he has cared about his entire career. So one last thing I will say about Bob, he has served as a member of the Advisory Council for the Retired Attorney Pro Bono Program. He was appointed to that by the former Chief Judge of this state, Jonathan Lipman, who is also an alum. And I think that is an indication as well of his dedication to lawyers in the public service. He's had an extraordinary career. He is a tireless advocate and a diligent public servant. So thank you, Bob, for your tremendous dedication to the law, to the law school, and your support of this terrific lecture series. So please join me in giving a warm welcome to Bob Abrams.
Thanks very much, Dean. I enormously appreciate that very, very gracious introduction. It's hard to believe that it's a quarter of a century. This is the 26th lecture. 25 years ago, we began this. Dean McKenzie is now the 4th dean to introduce the program. It started with John Sexton, Ricky Revesz, Trevor Morrison. And it's wonderful to hear the high praise that the dean has gotten, although serving just a very short time. The enthusiasm of students and faculty and alumni is very great, and I look forward to having a close working relationship with Dean McKenzie. I want to thank people who helped make this program possible. Lisa Hoyes has done a wonderful job over the years. Matty Dioka. I'm very pleased that Gail Zweiges from the Public Interest Law Center is able to join us here again tonight. And I'm also very, very pleased that one of my former colleagues, when I served as Attorney General, has accompanied our distinguished guest speaker here tonight. Charlie Oberle, the former Attorney General of the great state of Delaware, is here, and I want to acknowledge his presence. And the list of alumni from the New York Attorney General's office who has done distinguished service is very long, but included in that list is a man who has come here tonight, Walter Rivera, former Assistant Attorney General, who is now a judge on the State Court of Claims. And I want to recognize his presence. We started the lecture and program because I was having a conversation with Dean Sexton saying, you know, I had 28 glorious, wonderful years that were very exciting. I feel very fulfilled as a result of my years in government and in politics. And politics increasingly is a dirty word and has a bad name and has a bad reputation. And I'm worried that students will just initially discard the idea that they might run for office, enter politics, enter government, do public service. And we need these young people because they've got the energy, the idealism, the enthusiasm to come in and try some new things and clean house and repair the wrongs that exist. We don't live, certainly, in a perfect world and perfect society, so we need them desperately. And we started to talk and think about what could be done, and NYU is such a leader in so many ways, and especially in trying to guide people into public service. And we came up with the idea that perhaps what I experienced in the course of my career, that most people I came in contact with were good, honest, hardworking, effective, diligent people serving the public, that the students should know that. They should know that that what they read about in the newspapers are the outliers. They're the renegades. Most of the people are very, very good, strong people of strong character, and they should realize that and perhaps see it firsthand. And so the idea of having someone in public life come each year with students seeing them in the flesh might cause some inspiration to flow and for them to make a career choice, either initially or later in their life, about doing public service and perhaps entering politics. And it's been a wonderful quarter of a century because we've had governors and attorneys general and United States senators and judges come to this microphone. And I think students leave saying, hey, maybe that's something really worthwhile to aspire to. And tonight is in line with that tradition. We have as our special guest the Attorney General of the great state of Delaware, Kathy Jennings. Kathy is a product of the Delaware school system, a native of Delaware. And she has had a distinguished career in the criminal law, heavily on the prosecutorial side, but also on the defender side. She has served both on the civil, in terms of defending those who are accused of criminality and those who are engaged in the prosecution of crime. And so she brings a sense of balance, a sense of fairness, and she has displayed that in the course of her tenure as Attorney General, seeking changes in the criminal justice system to make it more fair. She has been a strong opponent of the excesses in gun sales and gun weapons, assault weapons that are being sold, and heavy-duty magazine ammunition for those guns, and the kind of people who should be able to go, who are currently allowed to go to a counter and buy a gun and do such violence in the communities that we live in and that we hear so much about. She's been a tremendous advocate for reproductive freedom, for women having the right to control the destiny of their own body. She has fought tenaciously to have a law in the state of Delaware, notwithstanding what the Supreme Court has done in terms of a federal national right, to guarantee any woman in Delaware to be able to have the right to choose. She has been a fierce advocate for making sure that people are able to protect their rights and their liberties and having access to government. The office in Delaware is heavily criminal. There are no district attorneys. It's the Delaware Attorney General who is the chief and key prosecutor of crime in that state, but at the same time, she has worked to reshape the Office of Attorney General to make it sensitive to the needs of consumers, of those who are concerned about civil rights violations and environmental protection. So she has been a role model as a public official. And let me conclude by saying that it's one thing to bring experience and ability to a public service office, but it's another thing to bring a special human quality of decency, of integrity, of compassion and commitment to serve. And that our speaker tonight has in abundance. And that's why I'm very, very proud to have you meet and introduce to you the Distinguished Attorney General of Delaware, Kathy Jennings.
Good evening, everyone. And thank you so much, Bob, Dean McKenzie. It's an honor to be here this evening at NYU Law School. And as a point of personal privilege, I want to say that I'm deeply grateful that Charlie O'Reilly has accompanied me, as well as Mary Grace Colonna of my office. Charlie served as Delaware's Attorney General for 3 terms, and then under President Obama as United States Attorney. And he is a colleague, a long-term friend. We were in private practice together for many years as defense attorneys. And I have to say, we do complete each other's sentences for the most part. And I'm very proud of the fact that Charlie is now working in the Attorney General's office, where he loves to work. And he works really hard at handling all of our pardons, commutation decisions in the state. So thank you, Charlie, for everything you do. Yeah, well, I had to start with you because you gave me a start in the office. So let's just talk a little bit about how I got here. I was born in the city of Wilmington, and my mom was and remains, even though she has passed, the strongest person in my life. She's my hero, and here's why. So when she was pregnant with me, my father left and took off to another state. He was a doctor. He never paid a dime in child support, never wanted to meet me, never has met me. And she was all alone in this world to take care of her newborn child. So we moved in with my grandparents. We did not have 2 dimes to rub together, so to speak. But we moved in with my grandparents in a small house in the heart of the city of Wilmington, which is our largest city. My granddad was a Marine in World War II. He came home, joined the Carpenters Union, and he was the sole breadwinner in our family. My grandma never got beyond 8th grade. But together, they were the strength that my mom needed to pull herself together. And she did do that. And every day she would take the train to the University of Pennsylvania, where she was in nursing school. She became the first college graduate in our family. I adored her. I mean, I was always by her side. In my office, I have this photograph hanging of her graduation from Penn. And there I am holding her hand as this little 5-year-old kid. But she taught me to be strong. And she taught me the value of an education. And she taught me the importance of public service. She was a public service nurse for quite a while. And she just, like I said, was my role model. And so I went to school in this small school called Sacred Heart. It was the only Catholic school in the city of Wilmington, actually in the state of Delaware, that didn't charge tuition. So that's how we could afford it. And I really credit that small school right in the heart of the city with teaching me the value of diversity and the value of getting to know people from all walks of life, all colors, and all cultural backgrounds. And it, to this day, has stood me in good stead. So when I came from Sacred Heart School in the city, where I was probably headed for some trouble, I was hanging around with, the wrong people. I was riding around in cars where I shouldn't have been. I had a tendency to take stuff from stores that I wasn't allowed to take, even though my mother made me walk back to a store one day and give it back. And so I was just going down the wrong path. My mother then took me to the suburbs and put me in a different school, and she eventually remarried. And so I got lucky. She taught me that, you just got to get your education, or else you're going to keep going down the wrong path. And so I transformed, and I realized the value of that high school education. It was a public high school, and I thrived. Even though I walked in with a black leather jacket and boots, and everybody else was wearing pink and green from our town of Greenville at the time, eventually I thrived. And I went to the University of Delaware, and I decided eventually to go to law school. And so I went to Villanova Law School. The first year there, I literally fell in love with criminal law. It was fascinating to me, this idea of crime and justice and how we administer justice and how we get, from point A to a fair and just criminal system. I also wanted to be a trial attorney. And so it's no surprise that I joined the Department of Justice, the Attorney General's office in Delaware, which, as Bob said, has full criminal jurisdiction. We do not have district attorneys. We're it, from misdemeanors on up to murder. When I joined, I was the second female in the entire criminal division in our state. It was a man's world, and it was a white man's world. And Charlie knows it. And it was tough to break into that world for sure. But I do credit the only other female in the office when I joined, Lucy Serino, with literally, taking me under her wing and teaching me how to try a case. I tried the first rape case I had ever tried with Lucy. And so the value of having mentors in our lives is so important, because but for Lucy, I don't know if I would have stayed in that office. And to this day, I credit her with teaching me how to try a case, with telling me you can do anything. So I went on to try domestic violence cases. I went on to try child abuse cases. I joined the first ever rape unit, and for approximately 4 years, ran the rape unit in our office, and then went on to try homicide cases, including Delaware's only serial killer. I was lucky enough to work for Charlie as his second in command of the entire office, and that's where I truly discovered, hey, there's more to the Attorney General's office than the criminal division. And I learned about the importance of the work the office does. Delaware has one of the most powerful Attorney General's offices in the country. Our jurisdiction is extremely broad. We now, as I stand here before you today, we have jurisdiction over civil rights violations, public corruption. Of course, we have a consumer division, a fraud division. We have a family division devoted to helping children in our state. We have a criminal division, and we have a traditional civil division. While it may not seem large by New York standards, we have the largest law firm in the state of Delaware. And I like to say we have the most powerful law firm in the state of Delaware and the best law firm in the state of Delaware. There are over 500 employees, 275 attorneys, and we are growing by leaps and bounds every year. That is all good. How many of you are interested in a career in public service? Good. All right. So I want this to be a dialogue and not a lecture to you. But what I realized when I became second in command as Chief Deputy Attorney General, moving away from my world of criminal law, is how much an Attorney General office can do to help people. When I walk around my office, whether it's, we have three counties in the small state of Delaware, and we have an office in each county. No matter where I go and no matter who I talk to in our office, whether it's the lawyers in our office, social workers, paralegals, investigators, administrative staff, they all tell me the same thing. And what is that? They say, I want to come to work. And I want to come to work every morning because I know the work I'm doing makes a difference. I'm not going to get paid what I would get paid in the private sector, far from it. But I never feel like when I come to work that I am working. And the next thing I know, it's the end of the day and I'm going home. How many careers do people have where you can say that? I never worked a day in my life in the Attorney General's office. I loved every minute of it. I loved being in the courtroom. I love the camaraderie and the lifelong relationships you have with people. Delaware's a small state. Our governor calls it a state of neighbors. The longest term relationships I have are those that began in the Attorney General's office to this day. And I am so very lucky to have met the people who work there as public servants, as Bob Abrams said. You give up a lot, but you get so much more. And it is entirely fulfilling to me. I think I now have the best job in the world, by the way. I know I have the best job in the world because each and every day when I wake up and I go to work, I get to help people and help them in their everyday lives and help them across so many areas of the law. It is the best use of my legal skills that I can imagine. And so I still have a huge interest in the criminal law, and that's where I want to talk with you tonight because that's my heart, that's my passion. And so I prosecuted those cases that I told you about for a number of years. And after Charlie ran for the U.S. Senate in a bad year for Democrats, we went out to lunch the next day. And I said, Charlie, what are we going to do now? You're not going to be Attorney General anymore. You're not going to be the senator. And I'm not going to be chief deputy. And we decided to hang out our shingle. We talked to different law firms, but we made a decision to just go out on our own. And I don't know that I would have done that with anyone else because we had no clients, we had no business, but we hung out that shingle and we got really lucky. We have had an amazing career in private practice. What I learned from being an attorney who largely was doing defense work in state court and federal court, as well as regulatory work for individuals and for companies, was the other side of the criminal justice system. And let me give you an example of that. For the most part, we handle cases across a variety of subjects, whether it was white collar work, whether it was, the basic aspects of criminal law. But what I learned was from the people I represent. And one of them is a man named Lawrence Johnson. I'm going to tell you a little bit about Lawrence Johnson. Lawrence Johnson grew up in New York. He had a number of cousins who, at the age of 16, brought Lawrence Johnson, at the age of 16, down to Delaware because his cousins were going to do a robbery of a gun store. Lawrence didn't have a criminal record. I think he had one truancy violation as a 16-year-old. But they brought him down and they said, you be the lookout for this armed robbery. And Lawrence did that. His cousins who went inside the gun store ended up shooting and killing the gun store owner and stealing a bunch of guns. They didn't make it beyond 30 minutes after they left that gun store that all of them got arrested, including Lawrence. So Lawrence is arrested as a 16-year-old. He is charged with felony murder. He is charged with the theft of every one of those guns. So there's, 30 possessions of a firearm during the commission of a felony. And he was tried as an adult. I met Lawrence after he had spent more than half his life in an adult prison. And he hired me to do post-conviction work for him. I carefully examined the trial record and I spotted an issue that I thought was meaningful, but the judge didn't agree and we lost. And I remember going down to the prison where Lawrence was, and there was a plexiglass window that separated us. And Lawrence, I had to tell him we lost. The only issue I could come up with. And I put my hand on the glass and he put his hand on the other side. And I said, I will never forget you. I don't think you should be here, and I will never forget you. Then Miller v. Alabama was decided. And now I knew that Lawrence had a chance. And the Supreme Court in that case decided that you could not sentence a juvenile to life imprisonment without an individualized sentencing hearing. And so I filed the first motion on his behalf in court to have that individualized sentencing hearing. We had it in front of a very sympathetic judge, Judge Tolliver, who never thought Lawrence should have been there either. And he was the first person to walk free in the state of Delaware as a result of that decision. That's the work attorneys can do. And that work spurred me to one day run for Attorney General because our criminal justice system was in need of substantial work. I ran because I wanted our system to be fair and equal for everyone, regardless of the color of our skin, the size of our wallet, or the zip code where we live. There were people sitting in prison for the rest of their lives for drug offenses, not violent offenses, but for drug offenses. There were people sentenced to hundreds of years in prison who didn't need to be there. And there were people who were in there because they were too poor to afford an attorney and they couldn't make bail. And so I went to work and I said, look, I'm a prosecutor. If someone commits a violent crime, I am going to prosecute that crime and I'm going to prosecute it aggressively and vigorously. But I am also going to make sure that that person's constitutional rights are protected and that we make sure that we do not ever admit evidence in a court of law that should not be admitted in a court of law. And I want to make sure that people shouldn't be held in prison prior to trial just because they're too poor. And I wanted to make sure that those 3 strikes and you get a life sentence for drug offenses were gone and a thing of the past. I was lucky I got elected. And in the first year, we worked with the legislature to pass 11 laws that reformed our criminal justice system. For the first time, we got expungements in the state of Delaware that would enable people with low-level nonviolent offenses to get those records expunged. It passed unanimously in our state Senate. So on a bipartisan basis, because it was a jobs bill. Fast forward, and we now host expungement fairs across the state, and we will continue to do that. And it's really helped a number of people. There are a number of other reforms that we have enacted. Happy to talk with you about those tonight. But I want to wrap it up by saying that, we're in a very different climate now. This country is so divided. And people believe that, public safety, that they're afraid to walk out their doors. Gun violence did go up during COVID and after COVID, but that went up in red states and blue states. This isn't a partisan issue. This is an everyone issue. We are divided, and we are getting blamed because we dared to try to make our criminal justice system fair and equal. Abortion is on the ballot. And it is incredibly important that attorneys general across the country protect women's access to abortion. That is the role of the attorney general, and I am taking on that fight and have taken on that fight. And we have to protect voting rights and our very democracy. And that's the other thing the attorneys generals in our country do, and that is protect our basic rights. And there is no more important right than the right to vote. So I don't know if I've convinced any of you to enter into a career of public service or specifically to come to the Attorney General's office, but I would very much like to answer your questions.
Please, we have a willing person to answer any and all of your questions. Who's going to be the first one to inquire? All right, it always needs a little warming up, Kathy. So it's a very toxic atmosphere out there, politically, governmentally. You made reference to it. What's the antidote? I mean, is there an antidote? Where are we headed? Where are we going as a country, as a society?
Well, the plain and simple antidote is the truth. We have to tell the truth. My friend Joe Biden won the election for president. Hands down, no ifs, ands, or buts. And we have to make sure that we are zealous in guarding the right to vote. Having said that, I think there are a lot of people out there who are quiet, who are the majority, who care deeply about our democracy, care deeply about our rights. They're just not screaming and shouting about it. And so when we can, we have to try to build consensus. And we have to have the courage to sit down at the table with people who don't necessarily agree with us. And we have to reach across the aisle. Bob, you were great at it. And Charlie was too. And I think that's important. In Delaware, we're still able to do that, to reach across the aisle, to talk to people, and to try to build consensus around an issue. That has to be done everywhere. And it's not being done right now. And people are believing things that simply aren't true. I believe that there are people fomenting violence in our country. Look what happened on January 6th. Stunning, devastating to democracy. And it continues. Hate crimes are on the rise in our country, and attorneys general have to be very strong in fighting against hate crime and fighting hate in and of itself. We have to honor and value our differences, not segregate ourselves into differences without listening.
Judge Rivera.
Yes, I know that Attorney General when he was in office, was very active with the National Association of Attorney Generals, and I'm wondering if that association is still going strong and how that might be a national platform for some of the reforms that you have promoted.
So I kind of grew up going to the National Attorneys General Association meetings, especially when Charlie was Attorney General. And I was in awe of the Attorneys General back then because they did come together. You had an Attorney General, Grant Woods in Arizona, Republican. His chief deputy was Rob Kerry, Republican. We became really good friends. They taught me how to start the first consumer protection unit in our office. Everything I needed legislatively and enforcement-wise came from them. And we remained friends for the rest of Grant's life. He eventually became a Democrat, but he joined a group called States United. And States United was formed on a bipartisan basis, a nonpartisan basis, to protect the right to vote. I believe that you can reach across the aisle to protect that right. It's just harder to do. And the association has seen some setbacks and problems. The state of Alabama left. The head of the National Attorneys General Association at the time, the president was DC Attorney General Carl Racine, a very dear friend of mine. I was on the executive committee when he was president. His presidential initiative, which every AG gets who is president of NAG, his presidential initiative was the People versus Hate. Timely, important, and he did a tremendous job educating attorneys general and everyone in that arena about hate. But Alabama left. And then we are seeing other Republicans leave the association. So it's a difficult time. I hope that once this election is over, we can begin at NAG to try to come together and heal. It's not easy. Lawrence Wasden, the Attorney General of Idaho, he and I probably agree on nothing. I know we don't agree on abortion. I know we don't agree on gun safety laws. I know we don't agree on many issues. We became very close because he believed in the truth and he believed in the cause of justice. He refused to sign on to the lawsuit that the Attorney General in Texas, Ken Paxton, filed in the Supreme Court of the United States to overturn the election in at least 3 states. He refused because he said, no, that's not the truth. This was a full and fair election, and Joe Biden won in that election. So what happened? Trump acolytes primaried him. He got hate mail. He had death threats. He had to have security for him and his family. And he lost the primary. And so this great sort of man who was so emblematic of all the good things about attorneys general, he's going to go. He's gone. And so we can't let those things continue to happen. We have to stand up for the Lawrence Wasdens of the world. And we have to find a way to get back to being respectful and holders of the truth.
And there's an initiative also underway at NAG. The attorney, one of Kathy's colleagues, former dean of the Colorado Law School, Phil Weiser.
An alum.
And an alum of this law school and the speaker last year, the 25th anniversary speaker. And he clerked for Judge Ginsburg and said that there's got to be an opportunity for us to be more collegial and to get together. And so he has started a Ginsburg-Scalia initiative. And the inspiration of it is these 2 people who sat on the United States Supreme Court, who were polar opposites ideologically, were great friends. They went to the opera together. They were warm, wonderful, devoted friends. So shouldn't this be, this should be the ideal for all of us, And he is starting an initiative to try to bring people together, elected officials together, people of different, the two major parties together. And hopefully this is going to take hold and be one of the possible antidotes. I
Yeah.
saw some more hands. Yes.
Consumer Protection Unit. Thank you. And I was wondering if you could talk about what sorts of issues that unit is working on now.
Sure. So we started the first Consumer Protection Unit with legislation that gave us enforcement authority. And it has grown exponentially into what is now the Fraud Division. And so the Fraud Division takes on, the usual cases that you would expect. We investigate consumer fraud. And as you know, scams are so prevalent. I get several scam emails every day and texts, and I'm sure you do too. And they particularly impact seniors. And we've seen some really gut-wrenching, harm done to individuals. When I was running for office, there was this very, very dear man who had worked all of his life for his pension. And he got a call that his grandson was in jail in another state and his grandson needed money for his commissary account. This man drained over $100,000 from his pension funds over time. And he came to our office and brought all of his information in a little shoebox. And so it took us 2 years because we tracked the perpetrators to Ohio. It took us 2 years for the federal government to take over that case. He will likely never see that money again. That's heartbreaking. And so we are doing that sort of what you expect, grassroots work within the Fraud Division. We have investor protection as well as consumer protection. And that Fraud Division also handles elder abuse cases. It handles something that is near and dear to my heart, which is impact litigation. We brought a climate change lawsuit in Delaware. Delaware is the lowest lying state in the country. And we sued 32 oil companies for their role in climate change. That's the kind of work that the Fraud Division does. In fact, we have what's called the Director of Impact Litigation. When I come back in a different life, I want to be the director. It's just the best name. And we do tremendous work. And we do the best work when attorneys general across the country band together, because then our voices are that much stronger. If you track the opioid settlement discussions, we all came together. We came together no matter what our party was for a common purpose, and that is to get as much money as possible from manufacturers, distributors, and in particular, Purdue and the Sackler family to give us the ability to remediate the harm done by the opioid crisis. And so, we have settled for $26 billion. And the Purdue settlement taught me more about bankruptcy than I ever wanted to know. But I'm really proud 8 states, including Delaware, fought against the bankruptcy settlement, and we succeeded in getting another $1 billion out of the Sacklers. So that's kind of work the Consumer Division has grown into.
46 states got together on the tobacco matter, where it culminated in $220 billion in revenue going to the public interest and to the states across the country, together with reformation of advertising, the way cigarette companies can promote sales of cigarettes. So what the Attorney General is saying is that if you want to work in that office, you're going to be able to do very, very valuable and important work in a whole variety of areas. Some other questions?
Thanks.
From Delaware.
Yeah, from Delaware. I wanted to ask, what do you feel like we can do on like a day-to-day basis at a practical level to, I guess, bring the two sides closer together to make the country less divided, like you were saying before?
Sit down and talk. So let me give you an example of this. In the wake of George Floyd's murder, Delaware, like probably all states in this country, was taking a really deep look at how can we work to make law enforcement work better with communities and prevent the kind of outcome that occurred with George Floyd. And so we set about working on police reform. We had several stakeholders to talk to when we talk about police reform. One of the things we wanted to do was get body-worn cameras for every police officer in our state. And that was a huge initiative that enabled us to come together. So our differences, the police wanted it, we wanted it, the police chiefs wanted it, advocates wanted it, and that's how we were able to get it done. So we got a law passed with the resources necessary so that now every officer in our state will have a body-worn camera. That's how you come together when you really work on an issue where there can be commonality. The harder issues, we're opening up disciplinary records of police officers to the public. Delaware has one of the, I will say, most difficult laws in the country when it comes to transparency on discipline records. It's called the Law Enforcement Officer Bill of Rights. So we knew and we believed, I believed, and I still believe, that there should be more transparency in that process because that's how you build trust. If the community has no idea what happens in a case involving use of force or, another matter that is substantial, then you can't build trust together. So we worked on changing that law. And I took the position that substantiated instances of serious violations should be open to the public. I don't care if somebody comes in with their uniform wrinkled or, not worn properly. What we care about is use of force and instances of dishonesty and things like that. So we worked really hard and we got police support for that. The police union supported it. Looked like the legislature was on board, but we couldn't get some community members to get on board with it, and it didn't pass. So now we still have the same old law. We just have to keep chipping away and working hard to bring everyone together, and I think we may. They wanted everything open to the public, and that just was not going to happen. We worked hard to, we're still working hard. I'm hoping we can get there. I think we will get there. But, I credit the police for coming as far as they did. The Police Chiefs Association and the unions came really far. But we just couldn't get it done. Having said that, body-worn cameras did get done. We just eliminated fines and fees for people too poor to pay them. You would think that would be easy? Not so easy, because the courts get a lot of that money. And they were very reluctant to change their systems. But over time, we chipped away, and we finally got there. So that's how you do it. You just, make sure people are included and that their voices are heard and that we see if we can compromise. Yes.
Another Delaware native. Oh, I'm actually in the Delaware AG's office. I'm not a student, just to put that out there. But how do people get involved with the AG's office? Like if you want to work at the AG's office, are you guys doing career fairs? Do you go online? And is there opportunity for mentorship if you are considering joining public service?
yes to all of the above. So we have our openings online. We have a very vibrant law clerk program where we go to law schools in, all around our region. And we recruit people to come to Delaware because, frankly, we do have the most expansive jurisdiction of any AG's office in the country. And if you are interested in the law, you are going to find, your niche in the Attorney General's office because you get to experience over the course of the summer all of these areas of law. And we keep improving. So now we have mock trials for law clerks. We now have programs where they get to see, not only what goes on in the courtrooms, but what goes on outside of the courtrooms in our communities, because we have a really vibrant community engagement unit. That was their favorite unit. The community engagement unit started under my watch because I have a good friend, and I will end with this because I know we're short on time. I have a good friend who I met in the reentry field. I was on the board of a place called the Achievement Center that is Delaware's largest reentry center, and it was doing a really good job of helping people coming out of prison, helping them with services, helping them with job training, helping with housing, transportation, all of the basics. I met a young man there named Corey Priest. Corey had spent 2 years in prison for trafficking in marijuana. And he was working in reentry, and he was doing a fantastic job. So when I got elected, I went to Corey and I said, "Do you want to work in our office?" He said, "In your office? Like, you prosecuted me." I said, "I know, I didn't prosecute you, but you're going to be on the same floor as the person who did prosecute you." And the more he thought about it, the more he thought, why not? I'm up to this challenge. Corey is amazing. He knocked on the door of the prosecutor who tried his case, and he said, "I'm here to help. I want to see if we can all work together to make sure that you have the information you need about the cases that are in front of you." So now prosecutors come to Corey and say, "How can we help this person? We don't want this person to go to jail, but we know we need something. And how can we help this person?" And Corey gives them the answer. Corey is getting the ACLU award in Delaware because his work has been transformative. And he's just an amazing human. And that's the kind of change I think that I also like to see in our offices. That attracts people to our office. Because if they know there's a Corey Priest there who really cares about helping people in our communities, then that's just a natural attraction to public service for young lawyers. I wish I could have brought Corey tonight.
A round of applause for
Thank you, everybody. It was a real pleasure, and I really appreciated your questions.